The first cold breath of the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau reaches you before the path fully rises, carrying the scent of wet granite, heather, and old snow held in shadow. Settle into the quiet, because nothing here is hurrying, and the highland keeps its own slow time. You feel the slope soften beneath your feet as we come higher, leaving the last sheltered folds of pine and birch behind us, until the world opens into a pale, wind-worn plateau. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau does not arrive like a summit with one sharp point. It arrives as breadth, as a lifted country of stone and moss, where the sky seems to rest lower and the ground seems older than thought. Around you the air is thin and clean, with a faint mineral coolness that settles on the tongue. The wind moves over the rounded granite, not fiercely, but with the patient sound of breath crossing the mouth of a wide bottle. You can hear small threads of water somewhere below the stones, loosening from snow patches, slipping under grass, gathering quietly in hollows where the peat is dark and soft. We are not climbing now as much as entering. The plateau receives you slowly, one shallow rise at a time, and each rise reveals more of the same calm largeness. There are no trees here to measure distance for you. There are only swells of gravel, cushions of moss, lichen freckling the rocks, and the long, low shoulders of mountains lying close together in the grey light. This is a landscape shaped by depth of time rather than drama. The granite underfoot began as molten rock far below an ancient mountain chain, cooling slowly in darkness until its crystals had time to grow. Feldspar, quartz, and mica settled into each other like grains in a very old sleep. Later, the mountains above were lifted, folded, worn, and removed by weather so persistent it could turn height into openness. You do not need to picture all of that at once. It is enough to feel the stone through the soles of your feet, firm and cold, as if the plateau is remembering for you. Every rounded boulder, every pale slab, every gravelly scatter of broken crystal is part of that long release from buried heat into open air. The CAIRNGORMS are quiet in a way that feels spacious. Sound does not vanish here, but it thins. A raven's call may pass once across the corrie edge and then become nothing. The wind may brush your sleeve, cross a field of blaeberry and crowberry, and continue into distance without meeting a wall, a branch, or a human voice. As we move gently onward, you begin to notice the shape of the granite country. It is not flat, though from far away it can seem like a table held up against the clouds. It rises and dips in broad backs and shallow basins, where snow lingers late into the year and where frost works quietly through the stones, opening tiny cracks grain by grain. The surface is soft to the eye, yet hard beneath the hand. If you lower your palm to one of the pale blocks, the cold comes through slowly. The stone feels slightly rough, not sharp, with crystals that catch the dim light like salt under clear water. Lichen grows over it in silver, green, and black patches, not covering the rock so much as keeping it company. Here, the weather is not an event, it is a maker. Mist, ice, rain, and sun have all taken their turn across the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, smoothing some surfaces and breaking others apart. Water freezes in hairline openings, expands gently, and loosens a flake. Wind moves the smallest particles. Meltwater carries them down toward burns that will one day join larger rivers. You can let that thought pass through you slowly. The plateau is changing, but at a pace almost too calm to see. Even the loosening of stone feels unhurried here, as if the mountain is exhaling over centuries, setting down small pieces of itself into streams, glens, and distant lowlands. Under the muted light, the colors stay close to the ground. There is gray granite and brown peat, olive moss and pale straw grass, the purple-brown of heather stems, the quiet red of blaeberry leaves when the season turns. Nothing asks loudly for attention. The beauty is in the restraint, in the way the land seems to lower its voice as you enter it. We keep walking, and the air grows cooler around the face and hands. The plateau height brings the body into a different kind of awareness, not tense, but precise. You feel the damp in the cuffs of your sleeves, the faint grit under your boots, the softness of moss beside the path, and the open pressure of the sky above you. In this high granite world, plants live close to the earth. They do not rise far into the wind. They mat themselves against stone and peat, making small shelters in miniature where insects move slowly and moisture gathers in beads. Alpine lady's mantle may hold droplets in its folded leaves. Mosses make green cushions. Tiny grasses bend and rise again. You start to notice how much life here survives by being low, patient, and small. It is not hidden because it is afraid. It is simply fitted to the place. The wind passes over it. Snow presses it down and then releases it. Frost touches it, thaws, returns, and still the roots remain in the thin, cold soil between granite and peat. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau has a softness that comes from scale. The land is vast, but the living details are minute. You may look outward across miles of stone and cloud, then look down and find a tiny leaf edged with water, trembling almost invisibly in the moving air. Both views belong together. The wide and the small are part of the same quiet. As we continue, the path becomes less certain, not lost, but more like a suggestion laid across the moor. Gravel shifts slightly. Patches of grass gleam with moisture. The smell of peat rises where the ground holds water, dark and earthy, like an old room opened after rain. Somewhere, a burn runs under a crust of stones, making a soft, covered sound. This high land gathers water with great patience. Mist condenses on vegetation. Rain soaks into peat. Snow lies in corries and shallow hollows, then melts by degrees when the sun returns. The granite itself does not drink deeply, but cracks, joints, and weathered gravel guide water downward, letting it thread through the plateau before it emerges as clear burns. You can hear one now, though you may not yet see it. The sound is small, a silver movement under the wind. It gives the stillness a pulse, not a hurried pulse, and not a restless one, but the quiet sign that even in this high, stony country, water is always finding a way through. The plateau's rivers begin modestly. They do not announce themselves as great waters. They start as seepage and trickle, as shining threads between moss and granite, as cold drops falling from snow into dark pools. Later they will gather into the Dee, the Spey, the Feshi, and the Avon. But up here they are still young and clear. We pause beside one of these small channels, and the water looks almost colorless over pale stone. It slips around pebbles and disappears under a lip of moss, then returns, making a sound like whispered glass. If you place your fingers near it, the cold is immediate, clean, and bright, as if the plateau has distilled the weather into touch. Around the burn, the plants are greener. Moss thickens. Sedges lean over the water. Insects may hover when the air is still enough, and on a warmer day, you might see the quick movement of a dipper lower down, where the stream becomes more definite. Here, near the source, everything feels provisional, newly gathered, still learning the shape it will follow. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau teaches patience through beginnings. A river does not need to begin loudly. A mountain does not need to be sharp to be powerful. A landscape does not need bright color to hold you. Up here, the first signs of great things are often small, quiet and easily missed unless you slow down enough to notice. And as we move farther across the high ground, the water falls behind us, and the granite becomes broader again under the pale, breathing sky. The next part of the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau opens in long distances, where the eye travels over rounded summits and shallow saddles without finding a single dramatic edge. The land looks rolled and ancient, as though a great weight of ice once passed over it, and then withdrew, leaving the bones of the mountain smoothed but not erased. That is close to what happened. During colder ages, ice gathered over these heights and moved slowly through glens and corries, pressing on the granite with immense patience. It scoured, plucked, and polished. It deepened some hollows and left other high surfaces open, cold and exposed. When it melted back, it left a landscape that still carries the memory of weight. You do not feel that ice now as force. You feel it as shape. The corries hold shadow in their bowls. The plateau edges break away into steep places where snow lingers. Boulders rest in positions that seem deliberate, though they were carried, dropped, and abandoned by ice long before any path crossed this ground. The wind moves over those boulders with a low hush. It smells faintly of rain and stone dust. There is a metallic coolness in the air, a taste that comes when clouds sit near the land. The light is diffuse, not falling from one clear direction, but spread through mist until everything looks softened at the edges. We walk through this softened light, and the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau seems to expand and contract with every veil of cloud. A summit appears, a shallow rise becomes a horizon, then becomes only foreground. Distance turns gentle and uncertain, and you no longer need to know exactly how far anything is. That uncertainty is part of the calm here. The plateau asks you to accept the near thing first: a stone beside your boot, a tuft of grass slick with rain, a pale crust of lichen shaped like an island, the soft rasp of your breath in cold air, the quiet weight of your body moving steadily over old ground. In places, the granite has broken into block fields, where stones lie across the surface in pale, angular clusters. They may look scattered, but they belong to the slow work of frost. Water entered cracks, froze, widened them, thawed, returned, and repeated the motion through seasons beyond counting. The result is a surface made by stillness and recurrence. You step carefully there, not because the place feels severe, but because each stone asks for attention. The blocks shift the rhythm of walking. Your body slows, your gaze lowers. The plateau becomes intimate again, reduced to the space between 1 foot and the next, while the wide clouded country waits all around you. Between the blocks, life finds protected corners. Moss grows where moisture lingers. Lichens spread over stone in delicate maps. Tiny invertebrates shelter in the cool spaces beneath, living out their quiet cycles in a world of shade, damp, and mineral surfaces. Even the emptiest ground is not empty when you come close. The CAIRNGORMS are often called Arctic alpine in their higher life, and the phrase is useful, but the feeling is simpler than the term. You are standing in a place where northern and mountain conditions meet. The season is short, the wind is persistent, snow can return late, and warmth arrives carefully, as if it is only visiting. Plants here grow as though listening to the weather. Dwarf shrubs hold close to the soil. Mosses and lichens wait through cold and dryness, then wake with moisture. Some species are remnants of colder times, living on these high plateaus because the conditions still resemble the edges of a more northern world. If you imagine the plateau through a year, you can feel how slowly it opens. Snowfields shrink around the corries. Meltwater threads through granite gravel. Ptarmigan change from pale winter camouflage into mottled summer browns. Insects emerge for brief bright days. Then the light begins to lower again, and the land gathers itself for cold. Nothing in that cycle feels rushed. It is a breathing in and breathing out, spread across months. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau does not bloom with the abundance of a valley meadow. It offers a quieter kind of life, one that is measured, close held, and tuned to the smallest changes in light and water. We keep moving, and the mist lifts slightly ahead of us, revealing the soft rise of another granite back under a pale sky. The ground is damp underfoot, and when the wind pauses, you can smell heather, moss, and the faint sweetness of wet grass. Then the wind returns and carries the scent away. Below the rise, a shallow hollow holds a small lochen. Its surface is dark, almost black under the cloud, though at the edges it reflects a narrow band of grey. The water is still enough to hold the shape of the sky, but now and then a ripple crosses it, touched by wind rather than by any visible creature. We come to rest near the edge without disturbing anything. The water has the quiet of a closed eye. Peat darkens the margins. Granite stones lie partly submerged, their pale sides softened by algae and shadow. If you lean close, you may see small movements near the surface, fine and brief, as life stirs in the cold water. These upland pools are simple in appearance, but they hold delicate balances. They receive minerals from stone, color from peat, and water from rain, snow, and seepage. Their temperatures stay low for much of the year. Ice may cover them in winter, and snow may lie close around them, muting sound until the whole hollow feels wrapped. You can sense why life here is careful. Aquatic insects, Tiny crustaceans, algae and microbes all use the brief seasons of light. Birds may visit. Red-throated divers are more associated with northern lochs, and golden plover call across moorland. But in these high waters the main feeling is smallness, not spectacle. The life is present, but it does not crowd the place. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau holds these dark pools like memories. They are not large, yet they gather sky, weather and stone into one still surface. When you look into them, you do not see depth in the oceanic sense. You see another kind of depth, the quiet depth of cold water held high above the forests. For a sleep-bound mind, there is comfort in that image. A pool that does not need to reflect anything clearly. A surface allowed to be dim. A place where the wind can pass, the mist can lower, and the water can remain itself. You do not have to solve the landscape. You only have to rest near it. And beyond the lochen, the ground rises again. So we leave the dark water behind and follow the granite upward into a wider hush. Higher on the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, the world becomes even more spare. The plants grow lower. The stones seem more numerous. The sky occupies more of your awareness, not as brightness, but as a broad, moving weight of cloud and pale air. The horizon becomes simple, almost dreamlike, a line of rounded ground meeting grey. Here, the plateau feels less like a route and more like a presence. You may notice how your thoughts slow when there are fewer objects to hold them. No fences, no buildings, no close trees, only granite, moss, cloud, wind, and the distant suggestion of corries falling away beyond the gentle rise. This openness is not emptiness. It is room, the kind of room that lets the mind loosen its grip. Each sound travels cleanly, then fades, the scrape of a boot on gravel, the breath in your chest, a faint trickle under stones, the small dry whisper of grass bending and lifting beside the path. The granite beneath us is part of a great batholith, a body of igneous rock that cooled slowly underground before erosion revealed it. Over immense spans of time, the overlying rocks were stripped away. What remains now is not the original mountain, but a deep inner piece of it, brought into the weather and softened by exposure. You can feel the strangeness of that gently. We are walking across stone that formed in darkness, far below an ancient surface that no longer exists. The plateau is a remnant and a revelation at once. It is old interior made exterior, hidden depth turned into open ground. The crystals in the granite tell their quiet story. Quartz gives pale glassy grains. Feldspar brings creamy and pinkish tones. Mica glints in tiny flakes when light catches it. These minerals cooled together slowly, and now they weather together, grain by grain, under rain, frost, and wind. When granite breaks down, it can make coarse sandy soils, often thin and acidic in these high conditions. Water passes through some places quickly and sits in others where peat has formed. The result is a patchwork you feel through your feet. Firm gravel, soft moss, wet peat, hard slab, springy vegetation, then stone again. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is therefore not one surface, even if it first appears that way. It is many quiet textures laid side by side. Each one changes the sound of walking. Each one holds moisture differently. Each one gives a slightly different home to roots, lichens, insects, and the low wind-shaped plants of the high country. We cross a stretch where the ground is almost sandy with weathered granite. It makes a faint gritty sound underfoot, dry even after rain in places where drainage is quick. Nearby, a mossy patch shines with water, and a boot placed there would press down into a cool, living sponge. You begin to understand the plateau as a slow conversation between stone and weather. The stone resists, but not absolutely. The weather returns, but not violently. Over time, they make forms together. Rounded shoulders, shattered blocks, gravelly flats, peat hollows, clear burns, and corries that cup snow and shadow. In that conversation, cold has a quiet voice. It sorts, loosens, lifts, and settles. In winter, Freeze and thaw can move stones with patient repetition. In summer, the surface may dry, warm a little, and then cool again under cloud. The land is always adjusting, but in movements too slow for ordinary attention. That slowness is what we borrow as we walk. Your breath can lengthen here. Your shoulders can drop. The mind, so used to sharp edges and quick changes, finds itself in a place where almost everything has been made by small acts repeated across deep time. There is no need to hurry inside such a pattern, and as the wind lowers for a moment, we pass into a gentler hollow where the plateau gathers a little more moss, a little more water, and a deeper shade of green. The hollow is shallow enough that it does not interrupt the plateau, yet it changes the feeling of the air around you. The wind slides over the higher ground and leaves this small basin calmer, with a damp, mossy scent rising from the peat. Water gathers here in quiet ways, not as a stream yet, but as shine, softness, and the slow darkening of soil. You feel the ground give a little under each step, as if the mountain has kept a small memory of rain beneath its skin. In this softer place, the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau shows how stone can make tenderness without ceasing to be stone. Granite slopes guide water into hollows, and hollows hold peat, and peat holds more water until the surface becomes a living sponge stretched between pale blocks. Tiny roots lace through it. Moss drinks from it. Sedge blades stand with droplets on their edges, each one catching a muted piece of sky. You may notice that the quiet here is thicker. The sound of your own movement feels absorbed, and the small wet places answer with faint presses and releases underfoot. There is the smell of cold earth, the clean edge of granite, and the almost sweet scent of wet vegetation beginning to rest. Even the light seems lower in this hollow, spread across moss in a soft grey wash. Peat forms slowly in places like this, where water slows decay and plant remains gather faster than they disappear. Year after year, mosses and sedges grow, settle, and become part of the dark layer beneath them. The process is unhurried, and that is its power. What looks like a wet patch on the high ground may hold centuries of quiet accumulation, pressed into brown and black softness. We stand with that thought for a while, not needing to measure it. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is not only a place of exposed rock and open wind, it is also a place of hidden layers, where water protects old plant matter from vanishing quickly, and time becomes something you could almost touch with your fingertips. If you kneel beside the moss, the air near the ground smells colder, closer, more secret. The small plants here seem to understand the value of shelter. They grow in cushions, mats, and close clusters, holding warmth and moisture in spaces no larger than your palm. Their leaves are often tough, waxy, or finely divided, suited to a short growing season and a world where drying wind can arrive, even when the ground is wet. You begin to see that low growth is not lack, but design. A gust passes over the rim of the hollow, and the grasses lean together with one soft motion. The sound is a long hush, almost like a distant tide moving across sand. Though we are high above the sea, you can let the sound pass through your breathing. The plateau is wide enough to hold the wind without becoming restless, and the hollow is quiet enough to turn that wind into a lullaby. When we move again, we move slowly, leaving the mossy basin without disturbing its small waters. The ground rises by almost nothing at first, just a gradual lift through gravel and heather, and then the open granite returns beneath the grey light. Behind us, the hollow disappears into the general surface of the plateau, as if it has folded itself back into the mountain. Ahead, the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau stretches toward a rim where the land will fall into a corrie. You cannot see the drop yet, only a change in the behavior of the wind and a widening of the air. The ground remains rounded and calm, but something in the distance feels more hollow, more spacious, as though the plateau is about to reveal one of its deep shadowed bowls. As we approach, the stones become more exposed. The vegetation thins and gathers in sheltered pockets between blocks. You may feel the temperature shift near the edge, where air moves up from the corrie below, carrying a colder, damper breath. It touches your face gently. It carries the smell of wet rock, old snow, and the faint mineral scent of water running unseen. The corries of the Cairngorms are among the most beautiful signatures of ice. They are rounded amphitheaters, carved into the mountain sides by glaciers that once nested in these high hollows. Snow gathered, compacted, and became ice, and the ice moved slowly, deepening its bed and steepening the back wall. When the glacier retreated, the bowl remained, holding shadow and weather. You come to the rim, and the world opens downward. The plateau behind you is broad and pale, while before you, the land curves into a darker chamber of stone. The far wall may be streaked with damp, and late snow may rest in a narrow gully. Not bright like fresh winter snow, but subdued, grainy and blue at its edges. The light falls differently here. It slips down the walls and becomes quiet. There is no need to stand close to anything dramatic. We remain where the ground feels settled, looking into the corrie as one might look into a deep thought. The hollow below holds stillness with a different weight from the plateau. Sound gathers there. A small stream may thread through the floor. Loose stones rest beneath the walls, shaped by frost, gravity, and time. The Cairngorms Granite Plateau feels older at its edges. Here you can sense the relationship between the high surface and the cut bowls around it. Ice did not erase the plateau. It worked into its margins, deepening hollows, sharpening some contrasts, and leaving other expanses above still open and rounded. The result is a landscape of both softness and depth, broadbacks and hidden chambers. If mist drifts into the corrie, it does not hurry. It moves like breath poured slowly into a basin, filling the lower spaces first and then lifting along the rock. You watch it soften the far wall, hide the snow patch, reveal a dark ledge, and cover it again. The stone seems to come and go, though it has not moved at all. In that shifting view, the science becomes almost tender. Snow survives longer in north-facing hollows because less direct sun reaches them, and because cold air can pool in these shaded places. The late snow feeds small streams, cools the air nearby, and marks the memory of winter far into the milder months. You feel that coolness now, a calm breath rising from the bowl. The life around the corrie edge is sparse but attentive. Mosses cling where water seeps. Lichens paint the rocks in pale crusts. Alpine plants may find narrow ledges where fine material has collected, and insects visit them on still days when the wind pauses. You begin to notice how each living thing here makes use of a small kindness, a crack, a drip, a sheltered angle, a brief warmth. A ptarmigan may be nearby and unseen, its mottled body matched to the stones and vegetation. If it moves, the motion is quiet, almost reluctant, like a thought crossing the edge of sleep. In winter, its plumage can become pale enough to blend with snow. In summer, it belongs to the greys and browns of the high ground, an animal shaped by the same discretion as the landscape. We do not follow it. We simply let the possibility of it be part of the place. The Cairngorms Granite Plateau is rich in presences that do not announce themselves. A bird may call once and fall silent. A mountain hare may pass over stones at dusk. Small insects may spend their whole lives within a few sheltered meters of moss, stone, and heather. You may find peace in that modesty. Not everything alive needs to be seen clearly. Some lives are best understood as a soft trace, a print in damp ground, a feather caught on heather, a brief movement at the edge of attention. The plateau allows this kind of existence, quiet and fitted to its weather. As we leave the corrie rim, the land levels gently again, and the open high surface gathers around us like a wide grey sea of stone and moss. The next stretch of the Cairngorms Granite Plateau feels almost suspended. The sky is low, the ground is high, and between them we walk in a narrow band of cool air. Mist drifts across the path, making the world smaller for a while. Then it thins, and the land returns in layers. A boulder first, then a rise, then a further shoulder fading into cloud. In this light, color becomes a quiet thing. The granite is not simply gray. It holds cream, pink, silver, and the faint sparkle of quartz when the cloud brightens. The moss is not simply green. It carries yellow, olive, deep brown, and the dark wet shade of places where water lingers. You begin to see the plateau through small differences. The way sleep begins through small releases. The wind has a soft, steady pressure now. It touches one side of your face, and then the other, as the path bends. It is cold enough to make the skin aware, but not sharp in this telling, only clear and cleansing. Your hands feel the damp air. Your breath becomes visible for a moment in imagination, joining the mist and then disappearing. The cairngorms are shaped not only by old ice, but by present weather repeated day after day. Cloud forms, rain falls, frost returns, snow lies, sun warms briefly, and wind crosses everything. No single moment defines the plateau. Its character comes from recurrence, from the almost musical repetition of conditions that wear, feed, reveal, and conceal. You can hear that recurrence in the landscape. A loose stone clicks softly underfoot. Water murmurs under moss. Wind rubs across dry grass. Somewhere farther off, a bird call lifts and thins. Each sound is brief, but the pattern continues, and we move within it as gently as a leaf carried along a slow stream. The open ground ahead is patterned by frost-sorted stones, subtle stripes and patches that show how cold can organize the surface over time. In places, repeated freezing and thawing heave stones upward and shift finer material aside. The result is quiet geometry, not drawn by hand, but made by water, temperature, and patience. You may not notice it at first, and then you do. There is a comfort in these patterns because they come without intention. The mountain does not arrange itself to be admired. It simply responds to cold, moisture, slope, and gravity. Yet the forms that arise are delicate and ordered, as if patience itself had a texture. You walk beside them slowly, letting your gaze soften rather than search. On the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, even the harshest processes can be described gently, because they happen through long repetition. Frost does not need to be imagined as violence. It is more like breath entering a small space, expanding, leaving, and returning. Water freezes, stone loosens, particles shift. Season after season, the surface changes its mind by a fraction. We cross a patch where gravel lies pale and open, with only a few plants rooted in it. Each footstep makes a dry, muffled crunch. The air smells cleaner here, less peaty, more mineral, with a faint dustiness rising from the weathered granite. It feels like walking over the exposed memory of the mountain's inner body. Then the ground softens again. Heather appears in low, wiry stems. Crowberry spreads dark and glossy. Bilberry leaves hold small droplets that tremble when the wind reaches them. Your eye moves from stone to plant and back to stone, and the alternating textures become almost soothing, like the repeating movement of breath. This is how the plateau keeps you present. It does not overwhelm you with variety, yet it never becomes empty. Each few steps bring another quiet surface, another small adjustment in color and feeling. The mind does not need to leap. It can drift from granite to moss, from moss to water, from water to cloud, and then back to the ground beneath you. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau has been walked by weather far longer than by people. That thought is not meant to make you feel small in a lonely way. It can make you feel relieved. The place is not waiting for anything from you. It does not ask for explanation, speed, or achievement. It holds its shape, and you're allowed to move slowly through it. As the mist thins, a pale band of light opens toward the west. It is not bright enough to cast hard shadows, but it gives the stones a softer edge. Lichens become more visible. Some are crustos, pressed tight to rock like old paint. Others are branched and tiny, forming little antlered shapes that hold moisture from the air. Lichens are partnerships, and that suits the plateau. A fungus gives structure and shelter, while an alga or cyanobacterium makes food from light. Together they live where many plants cannot, on bare stone, in thin air, through cold, dryness, and long pauses. Their growth is slow enough that time seems to gather in their surfaces. You may place your attention on one lichen-covered stone and let the rest of the landscape blur. The patchwork on it could resemble a map of islands or clouds seen from above, or old paint on a wall that has weathered gently for centuries. It is alive, but so slowly alive that it becomes an invitation to lower your own pace. Around these stones, soil is created almost shyly. Minerals weather from the granite. Organic matter gathers from plants and lichens. Wind brings dust. Water moves fine particles into sheltered places. The plateau builds its thin living skin from fragments, and those fragments support roots, insects, microbes, and the small cycles that continue whether anyone notices them or not. We continue over the rise, and the horizon opens again. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau spreads in muted folds, each one a little paler with distance. You may feel the breadth of the place becoming broader. It is not a view that demands a gasp. It is a view that asks for a long exhale. And as we drift onward across the high, open granite, the ground begins to lead us toward a field of stones where the mountain has loosened itself into silence. The block field lies ahead in a pale scatter, broad and uneven, with stones resting against stones across the surface of the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau. From a distance, it looks almost like a frozen river of rock. Up close, each block has its own shape, its own weight, its own covering of lichen, moisture, and shadow. We slow our steps here, letting the rhythm become careful and unforced. The stones are angular in places, rounded in others, and the spaces between them hold cool air. When the wind moves across the field, it makes a lower sound, brushing over edges and passing into cracks. The smell is clean, faintly damp, and mineral, as though rain has recently touched stone and left its breath behind. Block fields like this can form through long weathering under cold conditions. Frost works into joints and weaknesses in the granite. Pieces separate. On gentle slopes they may remain near where they formed, accumulating into open stone seas. The process is slow enough to feel almost still, but the result covers whole stretches of high ground. You can imagine the mountain loosening itself over thousands of winters, not collapsing, not breaking in a single act, but giving up pieces one at a time. Each block may have been part of a larger body of granite, then a fracture, then a separate stone, then a surface for lichen and mist. The plateau does not lose itself in this. It becomes more textured. As we pass among the blocks, the world narrows into the space immediately around us. Your foot finds a stable surface. Your hand might brush cold stone. A tiny pool of water rests in a hollow no wider than a cup. Inside it, the sky appears in miniature, pale and trembling. The large landscape is repeated in small, quiet places. Between stones you may notice pockets of stillness. The wind cannot reach every gap. Moisture gathers where shade remains. Fine particles collect and allow moss to begin. A crevice becomes a shelter, then a green line, then a small community of plants and tiny lives. Even in a rock field, the plateau keeps making rooms. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau often feels austere from far away, but from close beside the ground it is full of thresholds. Stone changes to moss, dryness changes to seepage, exposure changes to shelter within a few inches. You begin to see that the high land is not one mood, but many quiet microclimates stitched together by weather. A cloud moves over the sun, though the sun was already muted, and the block field darkens slightly. The lichen becomes less bright. The wet sides of stones deepen to blue-gray. Air cools against your cheeks. For a moment everything seems to settle lower, as if the plateau has pulled a blanket of cloud more closely around itself. There is comfort in this dimming. The landscape does not disappear. It becomes gentler. Hard edges soften, distances shorten, and the body no longer reaches outward as much. Your attention can rest on the next few steps, the next breath, the next pale stone, the next small sound of gravel shifting and settling behind you. In places, the block field may be almost vegetation-free, and in others, moss and dwarf shrubs weave into its margins. This pattern tells a story of exposure, moisture, and time. Where stones move too much, roots struggle to hold. Where fine material gathers and the surface rests, life begins its slow return. The boundary is not sharp, it breathes. We pass one boulder with a surface speckled like an old moon. Pale lichen on grey granite. Dark water gathered in a shallow groove. If you touched it, your fingers would find roughness, dampness, and the faint unevenness of crystals weathering at different rates. Granite is strong, but not uniform. Each mineral responds to the world in its own quiet way. Quartz resists. Feldspar alters more readily. softening toward clay over long time. Mica splits into thin sheets and glints before it weathers. These differences shape the feel of the stone and the soils that come from it. Even at the scale of a hand-on rock, the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is a place of slow transformations. You may feel your own thoughts becoming less linear here. The block field does not offer a single path for the eye. It offers repetition with variation, stone after stone, each similar enough to soothe, each different enough to keep you gently present. This is a good pattern for drifting towards sleep, where the mind wants rhythm without surprise. The wind lowers again, and the faint sound of water returns from somewhere beneath the stones. You cannot see it yet, but the hidden burn threads through the field, covered by rock and moss. Its voice is small and enclosed, a soft liquid murmur under the mineral surface. The plateau is never as silent as it first appears. We follow that sound until the stones spread apart and a little runnel appears, clear and cold, slipping through a notch between blocks. The water is narrow, but it catches the light and carries it. It flashes once, then darkens under a stone, then returns as a trembling line beside moss. You feel the coolness of it even before you bend near. Water here is both weather and memory. It has passed through cloud, snow, peat, gravel, and granite cracks. It has touched old stone and young roots. It has cooled in shadow, warmed a little in daylight, and moved onward without hurry. In the high CAIRNGORMS, even a thread of water belongs to a much larger patience. We let it move ahead of us and continue across the stones, where the block field gradually loosens into gravel, moss, and open ground again. The sound of walking becomes softer. The air smells less of bare rock and more of damp plants. Behind us, the pale stones remain, holding their cold, their lichens, and their long, slow story. And as the stone field fades behind us, the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau opens into a quieter sweep, where cloud and ground seem almost to breathe together. The sweep ahead is wide and subdued, with no sharp landmark to pull the mind awake. You move through a world of low color and soft repetition. Granite gravel, heather stems, moss patches, shallow water, and the long gray sky continue in calm succession. The plateau seems to invite the body into a steadier rhythm, each step part of a larger drift. There is a particular hush in high places when the wind steadies rather than gusts. It fills the ears without startling them. It wraps around the head and shoulders. It passes over the ground and makes the grasses whisper together, while stones remain still and wet moss holds its own quiet shine. You are moving, but the world feels deeply at rest. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau sits above the busier layers of the glens, and that height changes the imagination. Down below, rivers gather strength, forests thicken, and paths have clearer purposes. Up here, direction feels less urgent. The land expands on every side, and the sky comes close enough to seem like part of the terrain. This closeness of sky affects the light. On a clear day, it can be brilliant, with snow patches and quartz grains shining hard. But in our slow passage, the light is softened by cloud. It spreads evenly over the ground, removing harsh contrast. Every surface becomes easier to rest upon. Nothing flashes suddenly. Nothing insists. You may notice how the plateau's calm is not the calm of warmth. It is the calm of spacious cold, of air that has crossed stone, snow, moss, and open miles before reaching you. It wakes the skin gently, then lets the mind settle. Your breath enters cool, leaves warm, and becomes part of the moving air for a moment. In the distance, a faint line marks where the ground begins to fall toward another glen. You do not need to go there yet. We remain on the broad high back, where the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau holds us in its muted center. The sensation is almost oceanic, not because there is water around us, but because the openness has a slow surrounding quality. Long ago, after the granite formed and rose into the reach of weather, rivers and ice began shaping the region into the outlines we sense today. The plateau surfaces survived in broad remnants, while valleys deepened around them. This gives the CAIRNGORMS their distinctive feeling: high, rounded expanses, bordered by corries and glens, a lifted interior surrounded by descent. You can hold that shape in your mind like a hand resting over a calm map. We are on the lifted interior. Around us, waters begin their journeys outward. At the edges, ice has bitten into stone. Lower down, forests return. But here, on the plateau, the high ground remains open, cool, and patient. A small bird call moves across the air, thin and far away. It may be a meadow pipit, or another high country voice carried by the wind, but we do not need to name it with certainty. It rises once and is taken by distance. The silence after it feels larger, not empty, simply restored. The life of the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau often depends on timing. A warm spell opens flowers, a late frost tests them. Insects fly when conditions allow. Birds nest where camouflage and open sightlines suit them. Seeds wait, mosses pause and begin again. You start to sense how every living rhythm is tuned to short opportunities and long patience. You might see trailing azalea in sheltered alpine places, or cloudberry leaves spreading low across damp ground, or the minute forms of saxifrages where rock and seepage meet. These plants are not abundant everywhere, and that is part of their quiet dignity. They appear where the conditions allow, making small constellations of life on a broad, exposed world. The wind carries no rich woodland smell here. Instead, there is peat, granite, rain, and the faint resinous trace of heather. The scent is spare, but layered. It seems to clear space in the chest. Each breath becomes simple, and the simplicity feels restful, like a room with only what it needs. We cross another shallow rise, and a scatter of pale stones marks the crest. Beyond it, the plateau dips so gently that the change is almost felt before it is seen. The ground becomes wetter, moss brightens. A narrow line of water shines in the distance. The land is gathering itself again around drainage and softness. This repeated movement from dry stone to wet hollow is part of the plateau's quiet pattern. Granite resists deep absorption, but the surface shapes guide water into basins and channels. Peat forms where water rests. Gravel forms where water moves. Plants follow these conditions, and the whole high landscape becomes a mosaic made by slope, moisture, cold, and time. You do not have to study the pattern with effort. You can let your body feel it. Firmer ground underfoot means drainage and exposed stone. Softer ground means peat and stored rain. Cooler air in a hollow means moisture and shade. A brighter green means water nearby. The plateau teaches through sensation before it teaches through explanation. As we descend into the shallow wet place, the sound changes again. The wind is still present, but now it passes over sedges and damp moss. Water makes small broken sounds around hidden stones. A boot presses into springy ground and releases. The air smells deeper, more organic with that dark, clean scent that wet peat carries after mist. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau may look like a place of stone from afar, but water is constantly present. It lies in moss, runs under blocks, clouds the air, freezes in cracks, and gathers in snow. It moves through the land like a quiet thought, connecting surfaces that seem separate. Even the granite is shaped by it, slowly, patiently, without display. We pause near the narrow line of water. It is barely a stream, but it has direction. It finds the lowest passage through the moss, sliding over dark stems and pale sand grains. Tiny bubbles collect against a pebble, tremble, and pass on. You can hear the soft ticking of water against stone when the wind falls. This is one of the plateau's gentlest lessons. Movement does not need speed to be real. The water's pace is enough. The growth of moss is enough. The weathering of granite is enough. The gradual lowering of cloud over the hills is enough. You can let yourself belong to that slower measure for a while. And as the wet hollow releases us back toward firmer ground, we continue across the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau with the small stream moving somewhere behind us, beginning its long way down. The firmer ground rises into a wide shoulder where the granite sits close beneath the thin soil. Here, the plants are low and scattered, and the surface carries a pale, open feeling. You can see small stones embedded in the path, each one pressed into place by frost, footsteps, rain, and time. The whole landscape seems made of layers of quiet pressure. Pressure here is not the deep pressure of water, but the gentle weight of weather and season. Snow presses down in winter, ice presses outward in cracks, wind presses constantly across exposed surfaces. Even light has a kind of pressure when it returns after long cloud, warming stone by a small degree and waking what can grow. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is known for its severe climate in ordinary terms, but we can meet that severity as stillness. The short summer, the cold wind, the long snow cover in places, and the thin soils all make a landscape of restraint. Life does not flourish loudly here. It persists quietly, and that persistence has a peaceful grace. You may see heather cropped low by wind and weather, its woody stems twisted close to the ground. Bilberry may spread in small patches, with leaves that redden beautifully when the season leans toward autumn. Crowberry stays dark and glossy. Moss fills the spaces where damp remains. Each plant adds a small tone to the plateau's muted music. On some days, cloud shadows move visibly across the high land. They travel over granite backs and moss hollows, darkening and releasing them in slow sequence. Today, the cloud is more continuous, so the changes are subtler. A slightly paler light arrives, then fades. A far slope appears for several minutes, then dissolves again into grey. This kind of weather can make time feel suspended. You are not measuring the day by the sun's movement. You are measuring it by breath, step, texture, and the steady nearness of cloud. The plateau becomes less like a place you pass through and more like a state you enter. A quiet state, a cool state, a spacious one. We move toward another line of stones, lower than the block field, arranged almost like a natural scatter along the shallow slope. Some may have been shifted by free-thaw movement. Others may simply be remnants of weathered bedrock. The distinction matters to geology, yet to the half-dreaming eye, they all share the same calm presence. If you listen closely, there is a faint difference in how the wind crosses stone and vegetation. Over moss it is muffled. Over grass it whispers. Over bare rock it slides more cleanly, with a thin, smooth sound. These changes are quiet, but they keep the ear gently anchored to the world, as if the plateau is speaking in textures rather than words. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau also carries the memory of snow in its shapes. Snowbeds, where snow lies late, create special conditions for plants that can tolerate a compressed growing season. The ground there may remain moist and cool long after surrounding areas have dried. Certain mosses and alpine plants find refuge in that delay, using the protection of snow as part of their year. There is something restful about a snowbed, even when the snow has gone. The vegetation often looks different, lower, wetter, more closely held. The ground seems recently uncovered, as if it has just awakened from a long, white sleep. You can imagine the snow lying there through dark months, smoothing every roughness beneath a quiet cover. A late snow patch appears ahead in the lee of a shallow curve. It is not large, and its surface is slightly granular, softened by thaw and mist. The edges are hollowed where meltwater slips underneath, and the snow itself is tinted with grey from dust and weather. It does not gleam. It rests. We stand near it, and the air cools further. You can feel the difference on your face, a soft chill flowing outward from the snow and damp ground. A faint trickle comes from beneath the edge, clear water released from stored winter. It runs over dark soil, touches granite grains, and joins the slow drainage of the plateau. Snow like this links seasons together. Winter does not simply end and vanish. It remains in shaded hollows, in chilled soil, in late meltwater, in the timing of flowers and insects. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau carries winter gently into summer, not as a threat, but as a lingering quietness, a cool hand resting on the land. You may find that image soothing. Not every season has to depart at once. Some things can remain, soften, and become part of what follows. The snow gives itself to water. The water feeds moss and burn. The burn moves toward river. The river leaves the high granite and carries a little of it down through the glen. As we move away from the snow patch, the ground feels warmer by comparison, though the air remains cool. The moss is darker near the meltwater, and the granite grains shine faintly where they are wet. A few tiny plants grow at the edge of the dampness, taking their brief chance in the highlight. Their scale makes the whole plateau feel more tender. The path ahead is indistinct again, but our direction is easy. We follow the natural fall and rise of the land, letting the plateau guide us, rather than trying to hurry across it. The mist opens in front and closes behind, making a soft room around each stage of walking. You are here, and then here, and then here again. And as the last cool breath of the snowbed slips behind us, we enter a stretch of high moss and granite, where the living surface grows quieter and closer to the ground. This quieter stretch of the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau has a low woven quality, as though the plants have made a blanket over the stone without fully hiding it. Mosses swell in green and bronze. Heather stems cross in small dark lines. Crabberry and bilberry tuck themselves into the pattern. Granite appears through it all, pale and patient, never far beneath. The ground feels springy in places and firm in others, changing softly underfoot. Where moss is thick, it absorbs the sound of walking. Where stone rises through, the boot meets a colder, harder note. The rhythm is gentle and irregular, enough to keep the body aware without waking it fully. You move as if across a quiet threshold between stone and sleep. In these high plant communities, growth is slow and often close-packed. The air near the ground can be slightly warmer and less windy than the air above, even by a small amount that matters to leaves, insects, and roots. A cushion of vegetation creates its own tiny shelter. You can almost feel that shelter if you lower your hand to the moss and pause. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is full of these small acts of protection. A stone blocks the wind. A hollow gathers snow. A mat of moss holds water. A low shrub traps a little warmth. Life continues by using modest shelters in a wide exposed world, and the modesty of it gives the place a deep calm. You start to notice the details nearest your knees and hands. A bead of water rests at the tip of a grass blade. A lichen cup holds a speck of shadow. A tiny leaf trembles, then steadies. The scent of damp moss rises when the air stills, carrying a green, earthy coolness that seems to move directly into the breath. There may be insects here, though on cool days they are few and discreet. A small fly may lift from the moss and settle again. A beetle may move under cover, unseen except for a slight disturbance among stems. Their lives are brief, precise, and tied to warmth, moisture, and the flowering of small plants that the wind passes over without concern. Birds of the high ground make use of these same patterns. A dotterel, in the right season and place, may move across the open plateau with a softness that suits the land. Snow bunting may appear as a pale flicker against stone and moss. Ptarmigan remain close to the ground, blending with the colors around them. Nothing feels crowded. Each presence is spaced by weather. We let these possibilities remain gentle and unforced. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau does not need constant movement to feel alive. It is enough to know that life is fitted here, tuned finely, sometimes visible, sometimes only suggested by a call, a track, or a small shift in vegetation. The land holds its inhabitants lightly. Cloud lowers again, and the world becomes quieter by one more degree. Droplets begin to gather on sleeves and hair, too fine at first to be called rain. The air smells wetter. The granite darkens. Moss brightens. Each surface accepts the mist differently, and you can see the plateau receiving water without a sound. Mist is one of the gentlest forms of weather here. It does not fall in visible drops at first. It arrives as touch, as a softening of distance, as moisture on skin and stone. It beads on lichens and leaves. It makes the air feel close without making it heavy. You breathe it in, and the breath feels cool and rounded. For the plants, mist can matter. Moisture from cloud and fog can wet surfaces even when rain is light, helping mosses and lichens become active again after dryness. In a place where wind can strip moisture away, these calm, damp periods offer relief. The plateau drinks from the air as much as from the sky. You may imagine every lichen patch opening in its own slow way, every moss cushion taking in the fine water, every blade of grass brightening as droplets collect along its length. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau becomes less like a dry stone height and more like a living fabric, quietly rehydrated by cloud. The mist narrows our world to a few dozen paces. This is not disorienting in the voice of the story. It is sheltering. The far distances withdraw so the near ground can become complete. We have granite underfoot, moss beside us, cold air around us, and the soft sound of water forming drop by drop on the land. As we walk, droplets shake from heather stems and darken the stones below. The path is a little slick now, though still gentle in our pace. The smell of peat deepens, the wind loses its edge and becomes more like breath moving through wet wool. Everything is softened, and the plateau seems to ask for even less from us. There is a quiet mercy in a landscape that reduces the visible world. You do not need to look far ahead. You do not need to hold distant summits in mind. The mist gives you permission to stay with what is near, and what is near is simple: stone, water, moss, breath, and the slow lifting of one foot after another. And as the mist thickens over the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, we move gently through its pale interior, where the highland becomes a soft room of cloud. Inside the cloud, the plateau feels almost weightless, though the stone beneath you remains firm and ancient. The horizon has disappeared, and the sky no longer seems above us. It is around us, touching the ground, resting on granite, settling among mosses and low shrubs. You are walking through weather rather than under it. The sound of the wind is altered here. It has fewer edges, more body. It moves past your ears in a long, even hush, while the damp air takes away distant noises. If a burn runs nearby, its voice seems to come from inside the mist rather than from a fixed place. The world has become intimate without becoming small. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is well suited to this kind of concealment. Its rounded forms can vanish and return gradually without sudden revelation. A boulder appears as a pale shape, becomes clear for a few steps, then slips behind us into grey. A mossy hollow arrives underfoot before the eye has fully named it. Each detail comes softly. You may feel how the body responds to cloud. The gaze relaxes because there is less distance to search. The ears relax because sounds are muffled. The skin wakes to tiny droplets. The breath slows to meet the cool, damp air. In a place like this, weather becomes part of rest, drawing attention inward while keeping it gently anchored. Scientifically, cloud on the plateau is simply air cooled to saturation, with water vapor condensed into tiny droplets. But in the lived experience of the high ground, it feels like the mountain's own breathing made visible. Moist air rises, cools, and gathers around the granite heights. The land enters the cloud, and the cloud enters the land. Droplets settle on every surface. Lichen darkens as it wets. Moss swells almost imperceptibly. Fine gravel becomes darker and more defined. A hairline crack in stone gleams with water. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, which can seem pale and dry from a distance, becomes richly textured when cloud lays its hand across it. We pass a cluster of boulders that appear one by one. Their tops are rounded, their sides streaked with moisture, their bases nested in moss and gravel. One has a line of quartz running through it, pale as milk in the grey light. Another carries a dark crust of lichen, nearly black when wet, giving the stone an old, settled look. Granite can fracture along joints formed as pressure changed, and the rock cooled, lifted, and weathered. Those fractures guide water and frost, and they influence how blocks separate from bedrock. In the mist, these geological facts feel less like explanation and more like quiet relationships. Water finding lines, cold widening them, time making space. You can let those relationships settle without effort. The rock has its grain of history. The moss has its need for water. The cloud has its drifting path. Your own breath has its rhythm. For a while, all of these rhythms share the same narrow band of grey air on the high plateau. A few steps farther on, the ground dips slightly, and pooled water reflects nothing but cloud. The surface is so still that it looks like a small piece of the mist laid flat. Around it, sedges bend in damp arcs. Peat darkens the edge. A thin film of water glistens over granite sand, smooth and quiet under the pale light. We do not cross quickly. We follow the firmer margin, where stones give footing and moss rises in small cushions. The water beside us barely moves, but it is connected to unseen seepage, to rain, to snowmelt, to channels below the surface. Stillness here is not separation. It is a pause in a larger flow. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau often holds this balance between movement and rest. Streams move but slowly at first. Weather changes but softly in mist. Stone alters, but over ages. Plants grow, but close to the ground and in brief seasons. The whole place seems to show that rest and change are not opposites. They can be the same thing seen at different speeds. You may find yourself drifting with that thought. In your body too, there can be change without urgency. Breath moves, muscles soften, thoughts loosen. Sleep approaches not as a switch, but as a slow weathering of attention, grain by grain, like granite giving itself to sand under rain and frost. The mist begins to lighten, though it does not fully lift. The grey around us turns pearl rather than slate. A little more ground appears ahead. The tops of low rises emerge from cloud, and the sound of a burn grows clearer. We follow it gently, letting its small voice lead us out of the most enclosed part of the weather. And as the cloud thins across the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, the burn beside us becomes visible, slipping through moss and granite with the patience of the highland. The burn is narrow and clear, flowing through a shallow channel that seems almost too modest for the journey ahead of it. Its water bends around pebbles and slips beneath little bridges of moss. Here and there, it gathers into deeper cups where the bottom turns amber from peat. Then it runs pale again over granite grains. You walk beside it slowly, keeping to the firmer ground. The sound is soft and continuous, never loud enough to dominate the wind. It is the kind of sound that can accompany sleep easily, because it has movement without insistence. The burn murmurs, pauses behind a stone, loosens itself, and continues. On the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, these burns are young waters. They have not yet become the rivers that shape glens and feed forests below. They are still close to cloud and snow. Their channels are small, their beds stony, and their temperatures cool. They carry the taste of granite, peat, and high weather in their clear flow. If you look closely, the water reveals the ground it has crossed. Pale sand from weathered granite gathers in quiet pockets. Dark organic fragments move slowly near the edges. Tiny bubbles flash and vanish. A thin green thread of plant life clings where the current allows. Nothing is wasted, and nothing needs to hurry. Water chemistry, in granite landscapes, often reflects the bedrock's resistance to easy dissolution. The streams can be low in minerals compared with waters flowing through limestone or richer rocks. Peat can add acidity and color. These qualities shape what lives there, from microbes and algae to the invertebrates that shelter among stones and moss. We do not need to turn the burn into a lesson, though the lesson is there. You can understand it through feeling. The water is clear and cold. The stones are pale beneath it. The moss at the edge is saturated and bright. The channel is narrow because the source is near. Everything about it says beginning. A cloud opens slightly overhead, and the water catches a weak silver light. For a moment, each ripple becomes visible. Then the light fades, and the burn returns to a darker tone, still moving, still speaking quietly. The plateau seems to breathe with these changes, brightening and dimming without any sharp boundary. Beside the burn, you may see small signs of animals without seeing the animals themselves. A print in damp peat, a feather caught near a stone, a tuft of fur on heather where a mountain hare passed through. These traces are part of the ecosystem's quiet script, written lightly and often erased by rain before long. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau does not preserve everything on the surface. Wind and water revise it constantly. A footprint softens, a track fills, a seed shifts, a stone settles. This impermanence is gentle here because it belongs to the same slow processes that make the landscape. The land receives marks and lets them go. As we follow the burn, it begins to gather other trickles, A thread enters from the left, nearly silent. Another seeps from a mossy bank. The channel deepens by a few inches. The water's voice becomes fuller, though still calm. You can feel how a river begins, not from one grand source, but from many small agreements among slope, rain, snow, and stone. There is comfort in that too. Large things may begin quietly. Rest may begin with one slower breath. Sleep may begin with one thought losing its edge. A river may begin under moss on a granite plateau, unseen by almost everyone, already moving toward a wider life. The burn turns around a low rise, and we let it go. Its path will lead eventually towards steeper ground, through heather, into glens, among trees, past stones carried down from the high country. But we remain on the plateau, where the water is still young, and the air still carries the cool, open hush of height. And as the burn slips away from us, we turn back toward the broad granite interior, where the land rises in a slow, almost sleeping curve. The curve ahead is gradual, and your body feels it more than your eye sees it. Each step lifts by a small amount. The wet moss gives way to drier heather, then to gravel, then to pale granite stones set into the path. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau returns to its open character, wide and muted beneath the patient cloud. Here the wind comes back more clearly. It is steady rather than forceful, moving over the ground in long breaths. It carries the scent of damp stone from behind us and the faint dry smell of exposed gravel ahead. The air feels washed clean. Your face, hands, and lungs all know the coolness of it. The plateau's rounded summits have a calm that differs from pointed mountains. They do not pull the eye upward in a single line. Instead, they hold the gaze across a wide surface, encouraging a slower kind of seeing. You move over them as across the back of something ancient and resting, with no need to reach a dramatic end. Granite contributes to this form through its resistance and its patterns of weathering, but the final shape comes from many forces working together. Deep formation, uplift, erosion, glaciation, frost, rain, and wind all have their share. The result is not simple, yet it feels simple underfoot. Broad land, old stone, low life, moving air. You may notice a scattering of larger boulders on the slope, some partly embedded, some resting openly on the surface. They seem still enough to have always been there, yet each has a journey, whether from bedrock nearby, glacial transport, or slow movement downslope through frost and gravity. The plateau's stillness includes many histories. We pass one boulder large enough to shelter a small pocket of vegetation. On its lee side, moss is thicker and the ground less exposed. A few heather stems grow taller there, protected from the full sweep of wind. The stone creates a small climate by simply being present. It changes the world around it without moving. This is how shelter often works in the high CAIRNGORMS. Not as enclosure, but as slight reduction. A little less wind, a little more snow held in winter, a little more moisture retained in summer, a little more warmth near the ground when sunlight arrives. These small differences decide where roots can hold and where insects can rest. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is therefore full of kindnesses so small they might be missed. A crack that holds soil, a stone that breaks wind, a hollow that keeps snow, a moss cushion that stores water. None of these things has intention, yet together they make the highland habitable in its quiet, careful way. Your own body understands small kindnesses now, the steadiness of walking, the cool air across your forehead, the gentle repetition of gray, green, and pale stone, the absence of sharp noise, the way the land gives your thoughts fewer places to catch until they begin to move more slowly and with less weight. A thin brightness spreads through the cloud again, and the plateau opens a little wider. Far off, another rounded summit appears, its outlines soft and almost level. Between here and there lie shallow dips, blocky patches, and dark seams of wet ground. The distance looks quiet enough to enter in a dream. There is no single center to this landscape. That may be why it feels so restful. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau does not present one object to be consumed by the eye. It offers a field of attention, evenly spread, where any stone, plant, pool, or cloud may hold you briefly and then release you. This diffuse attention suits sleep. The mind can wander without getting lost. It can follow a burn, then a lichen, then a snow patch, then the sound of wind, and each path returns to the same calm ground. Nothing interrupts. Nothing demands a conclusion. Everything continues. We reach the top of the slow curve, and the ground ahead lowers into another broad expanse. The mist has lifted enough for the plateau to show its scale, but not enough to become bright or busy. You can see folds of land, grey-green and stone-pale, breathing into each other under the low sky, and as we begin down the far side of the gentle rise, the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau grows quieter again, drawing us toward the muted edge of evening. The muted edge of evening arrives slowly, not as a line across the sky, but as a lowering of tone over the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau. The greys deepen first in the hollows, then under the boulders, then along the small seams of water where the land has been holding cloud all day. You feel the coolness gather around your hands and face, and the wind seems to carry a darker scent now. More peat, more wet stone, more heather resting after light. We move downhill only slightly, following the broad shape of the granite as it eases into another shallow basin. The plateau does not descend quickly. It releases height in long, low gestures, so gradual that the body has time to soften into each change. Around us, the pale stones hold what remains of the day, while the moss and peat begin to take on the color of shadow. Evening on the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau has a quiet that feels different from the quiet of mist. Mist narrows the world, but evening lets the world remain wide while gently lowering its voice. A far shoulder of land is still visible, though less certain than before. The sky is a cool sheet of cloud, and beneath it the granite appears older, less reflective, more inward. You may notice how the sounds settle into layers. The wind remains above everything, broad and soft. Under it a trickle moves through moss somewhere to our right. Nearer still, there is the faint contact of your steps with gravel, then peat, then stone again. The ear begins to accept these sounds as one continuous fabric, and the mind has less and less need to separate them. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is made for this kind of fading. Its colors are already gentle, so dusk does not erase them with drama. It simply folds them closer together. Gray granite becomes blue-gray. Brown peat becomes nearly black in the wet places. Heather loses its small reddish tones and becomes a woven darkness close to the ground. We pause where the basin holds a little more moisture. The surface gleams in places, not with brightness, but with a subdued reflection of the clouded sky. A line of sedge bends over a shallow pool. The water is still enough to show a blurred piece of evening, and when the wind touches it, the reflection breaks softly, then gathers itself again. These wet basins are small archives of the plateau. They hold plant remains, mineral grains, wind-blown dust, and the slow chemistry of water resting in cold ground. Peat can preserve traces of earlier vegetation and climate, though we do not need to open that thought too far. It is enough to know that beneath the soft surface, time has been accumulating in layers too patient for ordinary counting. You can feel that patience in the way the ground yields. A careful step presses the moss, then it rises again after your weight passes. A small bead of water trembles on a stem, but does not fall. The whole basin seems to receive movement and smooth it out, turning even walking into something quieter than walking. As we leave the wet place, the ground firms beneath us, and the evening air becomes clearer across a stretch of exposed granite gravel. Here the scent is more mineral, less green. Small stones shift with a dry, muted sound. The cold has a clean edge, and you may feel it most where the skin is uncovered, along the cheeks, wrists and throat. The science of evening here is simple and beautiful. As light fades, the surface loses warmth. Cold air begins to collect in hollows. Moisture condenses where the temperature allows, and stones, plants, and peat each release the day differently. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau becomes a subtle exchange of heat, water, and air, all happening slowly enough to feel like rest. We walk through that exchange without needing to name every part of it. The body understands enough. A hollow is colder. A stone holds less warmth than a patch of dark peat. A breeze drawn across wet ground feels different from one crossing dry gravel. Knowledge arrives through the skin before it becomes language. A low ridge ahead catches the last pale light under the cloud. Its crest is marked by scattered blocks, each one made soft by distance. We follow the gentle rise toward them, and the plateau opens once more behind us. There is something almost tidal in this movement over the high ground, rising and lowering, crossing firm stone, then soft moss, then stone again. On the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, the eye can wander for a long time without finding an end. That is part of its sleep-like power. The land gives you enough structure to stay held, but not enough drama to wake the pulse. Rounded ridges, muted hollows, distant corrie rims, and the low clouded sky all drift into one another. A small movement crosses the edge of vision. Perhaps it is a ptarmigan stepping through the stones, or only a tuft of grass lifting in the wind. Either way, the moment passes without urgency. The high land often leaves you with uncertainty like this, and the uncertainty is gentle. You do not need to know everything that moves here. The creatures of the plateau often survive by being part of its colors. Feathers, fur, and plant forms echo granite, lichen, peat, and snow. In winter, some bodies pale toward the season. In summer, they return to mottled browns and grays. The landscape does not display life loudly. It lets life disappear into belonging. You might think of that as a kind of peace, to belong so closely to a place that you are not separate from it, to move without needing to be noticed, to rest in colors that match your surroundings. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau offers this quiet lesson again and again, through bird, stone, moss, and cloud. We reach the low ridge, and the view beyond is broad but dimmer now. Far away, the land rolls toward another shallow saddle. Beyond that, a darker rise sits under cloud, its outline thickening as evening gathers. The path is less visible, but the land itself remains readable, and we keep moving with the same unhurried care. The wind crosses the ridge without obstruction. It brings a fine dampness from the west and lays it on the granite. You can see the stones darken where moisture touches them. Lichen absorbs it slowly, and the pale crusts deepen into richer greens and grays. The plateau seems to become more alive as the light withdraws, as if wetness replaces brightness. Moisture at dusk can be important for lichens and mosses. Many can pause through dry conditions and resume their quiet work when water returns. They photosynthesize when light and moisture allow, and they wait when conditions do not. Their life is not continuous effort. It is readiness, rest, and brief use of the right moment. There is a softness in that rhythm, and you can borrow it. You do not need to remain brightly awake to be alive to the world. You can pause. You can receive a little moisture, a little coolness, a little muted light, and then let attention loosen again. The plateau has been doing this in its own way for longer than memory can reach. We step down from the ridge onto ground where heather becomes more frequent. The stems brush low against the path. In season, the flowers would bring a muted purple to the high country, but in this fading light, the plants are mostly texture and scent. Their resinous, earthy smell rises faintly when the air is damp, mingling with peat and granite. Heather is often associated with lower moorlands too, but here, on the high plateau, it appears reduced, weather-shaped, and close to the ground. It shares space with bilberry, crowberry, mosses, lichens, and grasses. This is not a thick, lush covering. It is a low, resilient fabric, able to bend under wind and snow, then continue its slow growth when the season allows. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau holds these plant communities like a thin, green-brown skin over old rock. They soften the surface without hiding its nature. Granite still rises through them. Frost still reaches them. Water still moves between them. The living layer is delicate, but it is not fragile in the simple sense. It has learned endurance without haste. As evening deepens, the low plants become harder to distinguish from each other. Their forms merge into a dark, textured ground, and individual stones stand out more clearly for a while, pale against the dim vegetation. Then even the stones begin to lose their edges. The landscape shifts from detail toward mass, from surface toward presence. We continue gently, and the air grows cooler by degrees. The skin notices each degree before the mind does. Your breathing finds a slower pace in response. The body seems to understand that the day is closing and that there is nothing to prepare for except quiet. The high plateau does not hurry into night. It settles into it. A shallow channel crosses our way, carrying a little water from the higher ground. We step beside it and follow for several paces. Its sound is quieter than before, as though dusk has lowered even the burn's voice. The water slips through dark moss, over small granite pebbles, and under a lip of peat, taking the last light with it. This small channel is part of a branching system that will eventually gather into a stronger burn lower down. Up here, each line of water is still intimate. It can be crossed with a step, hidden by moss, or lost beneath stones for a time. Yet it is already shaping the plateau in miniature, moving grains, cooling roots, and linking hollow to hollow. You may feel how water and sleep resemble each other here. Both find the lower places, both enter quietly, both gather from small beginnings and deepen without a sharp edge. You do not fall suddenly into rest in this landscape. You are carried toward it by many small channels, each one softening another part of the mind. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau becomes darker around us, but not closed. The sky remains pale enough to hold the shape of the land. A rounded summit to the east is barely a deeper grey against grey. The basin behind us has become a shadowed softness. The ridge ahead is only a slow lift in the ground. We pass through a place where the granite is exposed in broad, low slabs. Their surfaces are damp and cool, with tiny hollows holding water. Some hollows are natural weathering pits, formed where minerals and moisture have worked unevenly into the rock. They are small, almost palm-sized, yet they hold pieces of sky like quiet eyes. Weathering pits may grow slowly as water lingers and chemical alteration acts on susceptible minerals. In the CAIRNGORMS, cold, wet and wind all take part in shaping these surfaces. A shallow dip becomes a basin for droplets. A basin deepens by fractions. A rough surface becomes a record of many days when water stayed long enough to matter. You can rest your attention on one of these small stone pools. Its edge is rough, its water dark, and its surface moves only when the wind arrives. A single grain of sand lies at the bottom, pale and still. Around it, the granite holds its ancient crystals, cooled in deep time, now carrying evening water on a high Scottish plateau. The scale of the thought is large, but the feeling is small and calming. Deep time does not have to feel overwhelming. Here it is gathered in a shallow cup of water on a stone. It is present in the lichen growing slowly around the rim. It is present in the way the slab has outlasted so many changes and still receives tonight's mist. We move onward, leaving the slabs behind as the ground becomes rougher with low vegetation again. The wind drops for a moment, and the sudden quiet feels like a soft cloth laid over everything. In that pause, the faint sound of distant water becomes clearer, and somewhere across the plateau a bird calls once, thinly, then no more. The call lingers in the mind longer than it lingers in the air. It gives the evening a sense of life continuing beyond sight. The bird may be settling, moving, feeding, or simply keeping contact with its own kind across the dim high ground. We do not follow the sound. We let it fade into the larger hush. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau at dusk is full of endings that are not conclusions. Light ends into shadow. A burn disappears under stone and returns later. A plant folds into cold and opens another day. A bird call rises and is gone. Each fading is part of continuity, not a final stopping. This is why the place feels kind to a tired mind. It does not demand that anything be finished. It shows transition as something natural and unforced. Day becomes evening. Mist becomes droplets. Snow becomes water. Granite becomes sand. Wakefulness becomes rest. The same quiet process moves through them all. We approach another gentle high point, and the sky beyond it has a faint greenish-gray cast, the color that sometimes comes in damp mountain evenings when light is nearly gone but not absent. The stones on the crest are small and scattered. The heather lies low. The air smells colder, as though night has begun to gather in the spaces between rocks. Cold air often settles in hollows, but on an open plateau the whole surface can cool quickly when cloud thins or wind changes. The ground radiates heat away. Moisture condenses. Frost may form on some nights even when lower places remain merely damp. These processes are ordinary, but in the high quiet they feel almost ceremonial. The land preparing itself for darkness. You can imagine frost arriving later, not suddenly but as a fine brightness along grass blades and stone edges. It would trace the shapes that daylight overlooked. It would turn moss tips pale, silver the heather stems, and make the gravel crunch faintly underfoot. For now there is only the suggestion of it in the cooling air. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau belongs strongly to cold, not constant winter, not lifelessness, but a recurring relationship with cold that shapes everything here: plant height, soil depth, snow persistence, water movement, animal color, and even the loosened stones all carry some memory of freezing and thawing. Cold is not an interruption, it is one of the plateau's steady makers. We stand briefly on the high point, and the land spreads around us in darkness that remains gentle. There is no sharp outline now, only broad differences in tone. The nearest stones are visible, the farther hollows are dim. The cloud above still holds a little light, and that light is enough to keep us suspended between seeing and dreaming. As we begin down again, the path becomes more felt than seen. The feet choose firmness. The body balances with small adjustments. The pace slows naturally, and that slowing suits the hour. You are not striving across the plateau, you are being allowed to pass through it, softly, with attention lowered and breath steady. A low patch of juniper might grow in more sheltered places, lower or along certain slopes, but here the high surface remains mostly treeless, with vegetation pressed close by wind, cold, and soil. This absence of trees changes the feeling of dusk. There are no trunks to make vertical shadows, no canopy to catch sound. The whole sky lowers directly onto the ground. That openness can feel deeply restful when received slowly. Without walls or tall forms, the mind stops arranging space into rooms and corridors. The room is the plateau itself. The ceiling is cloud, the floor is granite, moss, and peat. The edges are far enough away to dissolve. You are held by vastness, but not exposed in any urgent way. The smell of wet heather returns as we enter a slightly lower patch. The ground is darker and softer, with more peat under the vegetation. A few small pools sit among the plants, reflecting the last pale grey overhead. Their margins are irregular, fringed with moss and sedge, and the water in them is so still that it seems older than the evening. Pools like these may expand and shrink with seasons, rain and snowmelt. They can dry at the edges in warmer periods, or merge into wider wet areas after persistent rain. Their lives are not fixed outlines, they pulse with weather. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau contains many such temporary or semi-permanent wet places, each responding quietly to the year. You may hear a tiny sound at one pool's edge, perhaps a droplet falling from a bent stem. It makes a circle that moves outward and touches the dark bank. Then the water stills again. The circle fades without leaving a mark. This is the kind of event the plateau offers at evening, small enough not to disturb anything, complete enough to hold attention. We pass between the pools, stepping on firmer hummocks where moss rises slightly above the wettest ground. The soft earth releases a faint scent with each careful step. It is dark, damp, and cool, like rain held for a long time. The air around the pools feels colder, and the skin recognizes the difference immediately. In the deepening dusk, the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau becomes almost monochrome, but the body still reads its textures. Moss underfoot gives gently, gravel shifts, granite holds firm, heather brushes the ankle, water reflects pale cloud. Even when the eye sees less, the senses continue to guide us, and that continuity is calming. There is a quiet companionship in walking this way. We do not need many words. The landscape speaks slowly, and we answer by slowing with it. You are aware of the guide beside you only as a calm presence, someone who knows enough of the plateau to trust its rhythms, and enough of sleep to leave space around every thought. Far off, the wind moves across a higher rise and reaches us a few moments later. You can hear it before you feel it, a low hush building over the open ground. Then it touches the pools, ruffles them, moves the heather, cools your cheeks, and continues behind us. Nothing starts or stops sharply. The wind simply passes through. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is often imagined as bare, but in this hour, its bareness feels like tenderness. There is little to distract from the essential elements: old stone, low life, moving water, cooling air, and clouded sky. The mind can rest among these elements because they repeat without becoming mechanical, like breathing in sleep. We leave the pool basin by another slow rise, and the ground dries underfoot. Pale stones return, dim in the evening. Some are flecked with mica that gives a faint glimmer when the last light catches them. The glimmer is not bright enough to startle. It is more like a memory of light held inside the rock. Mica forms in thin sheets, and when granite weathers, those sheets can catch even weak light. In brighter conditions, they sparkle, but now they appear and disappear softly as we move. Each tiny flash reminds you that the stone is made of many minerals, many histories, many small surfaces turned differently toward the sky. There is no need to study them one by one. You can let the glitter be peripheral, a quiet accompaniment to the darker ground. The plateau is full of such half-seen things at dusk: a pale lichen patch, a wet stone, a blade of grass holding light, a small pool reflecting sky long after the surrounding peat has gone dark. We cross the rise and find ourselves looking toward a broad saddle between two rounded heights. The saddle is almost level, a passage made of gravel, moss, and open air. It feels like a natural corridor, though no walls contain it. The wind uses it. Water crosses it in little threads. We follow it because the land offers it gently. The saddle carries a sense of moving deeper into the plateau rather than away from it. On either side, the rounded heights are darkening. Ahead, the ground is pale in patches where granite gravel lies exposed. The cloud has lowered again, and the distance becomes soft, not hidden completely, but unimportant. In this kind of landscape, orientation is less about landmarks and more about relationships. Rise to hollow, hollow to burn, burn to saddle, saddle to ridge. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau teaches a slow grammar of ground. You begin to understand it with the soles of your feet and the direction of the wind, rather than with sharp names. As night approaches, temperatures continue to fall, and tiny changes gather. Moisture beads more heavily on vegetation. The scent of peat strengthens in damp places. The sound of water grows more distinct because other daytime movements have faded. If insects were active earlier, they are quieter now, held by cold and dark. The plateau does not become empty when daylight leaves. It changes its balance. Some creatures settle, others move. Microbial life continues in soil and water. Moss remains wet, burns keep flowing. Frost may begin its delicate work if the air allows. The larger visible world fades, while smaller processes continue without needing light from us. That thought can carry you gently. Much of life happens unseen, and it does not need to be witnessed to be real. Beneath moss, in water films under stones, within peat, the plateau continues its slow exchanges. The visible quiet is only the surface of a deeper quiet, one that is full of work done without noise. We pass a patch of bare gravel where the path widens briefly, perhaps from repeated footsteps, or from natural exposure. The ground is pale and slightly uneven. Each grain of granite has come from larger stone, and each may travel farther one day in water, wind, or frost movement. For now, the grains rest together, cool under the evening air. Weathered granite often feels coarse, almost sandy, because its minerals separate into larger grains than many other rocks produce. This gives some high paths their gritty texture. It also influences drainage and soil development. In the CAIRNGORMS, that texture is part of the sensory world of the plateau, felt through the feet, heard as a faint crunch, seen as pale patches amid darker vegetation. You can let the sound of that crunch become part of the lull. It is steady but soft, irregular enough to feel natural. The gravel receives each step, shifts slightly, and settles again. Behind us, the marks we make are small, and in time, weather will soften them. The land does not hold disturbance tightly. The saddle narrows in feeling as cloud thickens, though the ground remains broad. We are again inside a dimmer kind of air. The distant heights fade. The immediate surface becomes more important. A stone with a white quartz vein appears at your left. A wet patch shines ahead. A low clump of heather bends and rises in the wind. Quartz is more resistant than much of the surrounding granite, and veins can stand out when weathering exposes them. In the evening, a quartz line may hold the last light with a soft, milky tone. It looks almost like a frozen stream inside the stone, a pale thread running through the mountain's older body. We pause beside it for a moment. The vein crosses the rock and disappears into the ground, continuing where we cannot see it. That hidden continuation suits the plateau. So many things here extend beyond what is visible. Roots under moss, water under stones, fractures through granite, histories beneath the present surface, and sleep beneath waking thought. A fine mist begins again, barely more than coolness. It gathers on the quartz, on your sleeve, on the heather tips. The air takes on that rounded dampness we felt before, and the world grows even quieter. This is not a new chapter of weather, only the same high cloud lowering itself gently over the land. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau receives the mist without surprise. Every surface seems prepared for it. Lichens darken, mosses brighten, peat drinks, stones shine. Your breathing slows in the damp air, and the boundary between body and landscape feels softer for a while, as if both are being cooled by the same passing cloud. We move on, and the saddle begins to descend into another shallow basin. The basin is darker than the last, partly because evening has deepened, partly because peat and wet ground gather there. A small burn crosses its center, visible only as a dim line of reflected gray. Its sound comes before its shape, a calm murmur beneath the wind. The burn is wider than the earlier trickles, though still modest. It has gathered enough water to shape a clearer channel through the moss and peat. Granite stones sit in its bed, their tops dark and wet. The water slides around them with a smooth, low voice. At the edges, sedges lean over and touch the current. We step near it and listen. The sound is not loud, but it is continuous enough to hold the ear. It has small variations, a brighter note over shallow stones, a deeper hush under a peat bank, a faint tapping where droplets fall from grass. Together they make a natural rhythm, and the rhythm moves downhill without asking us to follow quickly. This burn will carry dissolved traces from the plateau, tiny particles of granite, organic matter from peat, and the cold memory of cloud and snow. It will help feed a larger drainage, perhaps toward one of the great river systems born in these mountains. But here, at dusk, it is still intimate enough to be known by sound rather than by map. You may imagine water leaving the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau in many directions, each stream beginning with a small, quiet source. Some flow toward the Spey, some toward the Dee, some toward other glens and waters. The plateau is a high gathering place and a high giving place, receiving weather and releasing rivers. There is something soothing about a landscape that gives itself away so slowly. Granite gives grains, snow gives meltwater, moss gives stored moisture, peat gives color to the burn gives movement to the hollow. Nothing is taken abruptly. Everything passes onward through contact, seepage, and time. We cross the burn where stones make a natural, low passage. The water below is dark in the evening, but its movement is clear. You feel the cool rising from it, and the air smells faintly sharper there, washed and mineral. On the far bank, the moss is thick, and it takes the weight of a step with a soft, damp quietness. Beyond the burn, the ground rises again, and the sound of water slowly falls behind us. This is how the plateau holds and releases attention. For a while, the burn is everything. Then it becomes background. Then it disappears, and the mind settles on the wind, or the ground, or the darkening sky. Each focus arrives and passes gently. The Cairngorms Granite Plateau is now deep in evening, though not yet fully dark. The cloud above remains a pale ceiling, and the ground below has become a broad-shadowed texture. We move through it with an easy rhythm, trusting the slow forms of the land. The body has learned the pattern: rise, hollow, water, stone, moss, wind. As we gain the next rise, the mist thins just enough to reveal a distant corrie edge, a dark curve opening away from the plateau. It is not detailed now. It is only a suggestion of depth, a place where the high surface falls into shadow. The sight comes and goes through the cloud, like a memory returning in sleep. The corries at the margins remind us that the Cairngorms Granite Plateau is not endless, though it can feel that way from within. Around its edges, ice has carved bowls and valleys, giving the highland abrupt places where air, snow, and water gather differently. These forms make the plateau more complex, but from here they appear calm, dark, and far. You can think of the corrie as a held shadow, a bowl shaped by snow becoming ice, by ice moving slowly, by rock yielding under weight and cold. Now it holds damp air, late snow in some years, trickling water, and the quiet of steep walls. At dusk, it seems less like a drop than a deeper silence beside the open land. We do not go toward it. We stay on the broad back, where the route remains gentle. The corrie's presence is enough, a dark breathing space at the edge of awareness. The Cairngorms Granite Plateau continues underfoot, steady and cool, and the cloud closes again until the deeper hollow is hidden. The wind shifts slightly, and with it comes a faint scent of snow, though no snow may be falling. It is the smell of cold stone and wet air, a clean, almost empty scent that belongs to high places near night. Effective measure, a faint scent of snow, though no snow may be falling. It is the smell of cold stone and wet air, a clean, almost empty scent that belongs to high places near night. You breathe it in, and it seems to make more room inside the chest, not by excitement, but by quiet clearing. Smell is often subtle on the plateau, because there is little dense vegetation and no warm forest floor. Yet what scents exist are distinct. Peat after mist, heather in damp air, granite after rain, cold water crossing stone. These are not rich perfumes. They are low notes, and low notes suit the hour. The ground ahead becomes dotted with small frost-heaved stones, each sitting slightly proud of the surrounding soil. They make a quiet pattern across the surface, and we pass between them carefully. Processes like frost heave can lift stones as water freezes and expands in the soil, then settles again through thaw. Over many seasons, the ground sorts itself by slow repetition. In darkness, these patterned surfaces are felt more than seen. The feet adjust to small rises and shallow dips. The body knows the land through balance. This kind of attention is calm but present, like the attention of someone nearly asleep who still hears rain against a window. It does not pull you awake, it keeps you gently held. We reach a place where the vegetation is especially low and fine, perhaps shaped by exposure and thin soil. The ground seems almost brushed flat by the wind. A few pale stones lie embedded in it, and moss fills the spaces between them. The whole surface has the softness of an old, weathered fabric spread over granite. The Cairngorms Granite Plateau often blurs the boundary between hard and soft. Stone supports moss. Moss holds water against stone. Frost lifts both. Roots enter cracks. Gravel collects among plants. Over time, the hard and the soft work together, making a land that can feel bare from afar and intricately woven up close. You might feel a similar weaving in yourself as the script continues. Thoughts, sensations, and breath begin to overlap. The cold air is not separate from your breathing. The sound of wind is not separate from the room where you listen. The plateau's slow rhythm becomes a rhythm the body can share. Even while resting far from these high stones, a darker bank of cloud moves over, and the last pale opening in the sky closes. The plateau dims by another shade. Still, the ground is not lost. The nearest stones remain visible as soft shapes. Wet moss catches faint light, Water holds the skies remaining grey. The world is darker, but it remains gentle. Night in a high landscape can feel immense, but here we meet it gradually. There is no sudden curtain, only layer after layer of quiet added to what was already quiet. Evening becomes late evening. Late evening leans toward night. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau accepts each layer without change in its essential calm. As we move, the temperature continues to settle. A fine chill gathers around the ears and fingertips. The breath feels cooler at first, then warm as it leaves. Your shoulders may lower almost without noticing. The slow walking, the low light, the repeating ground and the steady wind all work together toward rest. A small patch of snow may still persist in a far hollow, unseen now but present in the land's cold memory. Its meltwater may be one of the threads we crossed. Its chill may have touched the air near a corrie wall. Even when hidden, snow shapes this place, holding winter within summer, holding white silence within the darker ground. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is full of such hidden presences. Buried ice in winter soil, water under stones, roots beneath moss, minerals within granite, animal movement at the edge of sight. The more softly you attend, the more the landscape feels alive with things that do not need to come forward. We pass another boulder, larger than most nearby, rounded on one side and fractured on the other. Its surface is dark with moisture, and one side carries a pale wash of lichen. At its base, the wind is gentler. Moss grows thick there, forming a small green bed between stone and peat. We let that small shelter enter the imagination. Shelter on the plateau is rarely complete. It is partial, and partial shelter is enough for many forms of life. A little shade, a little lee, a little trapped snow, a little moisture held past midday. These slight differences, repeated across thousands of stones and hollows, create the living complexity of the high ground. You can feel how this applies inwardly too. Rest does not always require perfect silence or total darkness. Sometimes it begins with partial shelter, enough softness around the edges, enough steadiness in the breath, enough repetition in the sound. The plateau offers that kind of rest, not enclosed, but held. The path turns almost imperceptibly, following ground that avoids the wettest hollows. The burn we crossed is now only a memory of sound. Ahead, a darker line suggests another shallow drainage, but it is far enough away to feel like something that will arrive later. For now the walking is over firm, quiet ground. As the last light thins, your sense of distance changes. Near things become more vivid because they are all that can be trusted. A stone, a moss patch, a wet print of water on gravel. Far things become atmosphere. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau turns from a map into a sequence of immediate sensations. Each one simple, each one enough. We slow further, matching the late hour. The wind is still steady, but it has softened in the damp cloud. It passes over heather with a low, rushing sound. Occasionally, a droplet falls from a stem or stone edge, landing in moss without much sound at all. The plateau is nearly dark, yet the air remains open around us. The rocks beneath the surface are still the same deep granite body, the cooled heart of ancient magmas exposed by time. That origin remains true, whether the light is bright or gone. Beneath your feet, quartz, feldspar and mica persist in darkness just as they did before they ever reached the surface. The plateau has known darkness longer than it has known our seeing. This thought is peaceful rather than heavy. Darkness is not absence to the stone, it is familiar. The granite formed in darkness, lay in darkness, rose toward light, and now receives darkness again each night. When we move through the evening here, we are not entering something alien to the landscape. We are returning with it to one of its oldest conditions. A faint silver line appears ahead where water crosses the path. We approach slowly and find another small stream, narrower than the last, but bright in the dark because it reflects the remaining sky. It curves between moss banks, carrying tiny fragments of peat. The current is steady and low, a ribbon of movement through the night-gathering ground. We pause beside it. The water's surface trembles under the wind, then smooths where the banks protect it. A stone in midstream divides the flow into two quiet tongues. They meet again below it, with no sound of impact, only a softened joining. The stream seems to show how separation and return can happen without disturbance. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau sends countless small waters through such moments, around stones, through moss, under snow, across gravel, into burns. Each route is temporary and enduring at once. A channel may shift, a wet patch may dry, another may open. Yet water keeps finding the low places, and the plateau keeps giving it passage. We step across at a narrow place, and the cold breath from the stream follows for a few paces. On the far side, the ground rises into drier stones again. The pattern repeats, but repetition here is not monotony. It is reassurance. The land tells you, again and again, that change can be gentle, and that returning forms can lead deeper into calm. Now the cloud begins to break in small, dark openings, not enough for stars to show clearly, but enough to give the sky a layered depth. The upper cloud is darker, the lower mist paler, and between them, the plateau lies in cool shadow. If the cloud were to part fully, the night would open with a wider silence. But for now, it remains softly covered. Cloud cover changes how the plateau cools. When cloud remains, it can hold some outgoing warmth near the surface. When skies clear, temperatures may fall more quickly. These exchanges happen above us without drama, part of the nightly breathing of land and atmosphere. We feel only the result as a slow adjustment of cold on the skin. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is a place where atmosphere and ground seem especially close. Weather does not feel like something distant arriving from elsewhere. It feels woven into the stones and plants. Mist touches the moss, wind shapes the shrubs, snow feeds the burns. Cloud lowers until it becomes part of the path itself. We continue across a small open patch where the ground is almost level. In the dimness, it feels like crossing a quiet floor, suspended high above the glens. The gravel underfoot is pale enough to guide us. A few dark hummocks of vegetation mark wetter spots. The wind moves steadily, not loud, but continuous, holding the silence open. You may imagine the glens far below, now darker, perhaps with forests holding the last of the day under their branches. But we stay with the plateau, strictly on this high granite world, where the trees have fallen away and the surface belongs to stone, moss, peat, water, and sky. The lower world is only a distant thought. There is value in staying. The mind often wants to descend toward familiar shelter, but the plateau offers a different shelter, a wide one. It asks you to rest, not by enclosing yourself, but by trusting openness. The clouded sky, the broad ground, and the low vegetation create a room with no walls, and the room is calm. A gentle dampness begins to settle more heavily. It could become rain, but for now it remains fine and suspended. Droplets gather on the ends of heather stems and fall only when they grow too heavy. Granite stones shine faintly. The path darkens. Every surface seems to receive the night through water. Rain on granite has its own quiet beginning. First a darkening, then a scent, then a soft sound as drops become distinct. If it comes later, it will move through the same routes we have followed all evening, into moss, peat, gravel, hollows, burns, and deeper channels. The plateau will take it in according to each surface's nature. We move through the damp without hurry. Your sleeves may feel cool. Your hair may gather tiny beads of water. The air against the lips tastes faintly mineral. These sensations are not interruptions. They are the plateau coming closer, translating cloud into touch. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau at nightfall feels ancient in a way that daylight sometimes hides. Without distant color and detail, the forms become elemental, rise and hollow, stone and water, wind and cloud. The mind no longer tracks every plant or rock. It rests in the larger presence of the high ground, broad and patient beneath the darkening sky. As we cross another low rise, the wind slackens and the hush deepens around us. The silence is not complete because the plateau is never truly silent. There is always water somewhere, air moving somewhere, a stem shifting, a stone settling, a distant call in another part of the dark. But the silence is full enough to feel like a soft weight. That soft weight settles over the body too. The jaw loosens. The eyes may want to close. The words keep moving, but they move as the burns move, around stones and through moss, never forcing a path. You can let the Cairngorms Granite Plateau remain partly seen and partly imagined, as sleep begins to mingle with the landscape. Ahead, the land lowers into one more broad hollow. This one is darker than the others, and the peat seems to hold the night close. We move toward it with care, following a firmer line of stones along its edge. The hollow exhales cold, damp air, and it carries the scent of water held for a long time among roots and moss. Peat hollows are shaped by hydrology as much as by topography. Water collects where drainage slows, and plant remains gather under saturated conditions. Over many years the surface can build upward, even as the hollow holds moisture. The Cairngorms Granite Plateau is not a simple rock surface, but a living and geological fabric where water decides many things. In the dark, the hollow has a deep, restful presence. It seems like a place where sound goes to lie down. The wind passes over rather than through it. The pools within it show only faint patches of grey. A few stones stand at the margins, pale and still, like markers of the boundary between wet softness and exposed granite. We do not step into the wet center. We travel along the edge, where moss and gravel make a narrow firmness. The body appreciates the careful path. Each footfall is slow. Each breath has time. The hollow remains beside us, dark and quiet, offering the sense of depth without asking us to enter fully. The life in such wet places continues in close, low forms. Mosses hold water within their structure. Sedges root in saturated soils. Microbes work through organic matter with great slowness. In warmer moments, insects may use the pools and damp margins. At night in the cooling air, the whole system seems to pause, but its processes remain. There is a lesson in that paused appearance. Rest is not emptiness. When you sleep, the body continues its quiet work. Breath moves. Blood moves. Cells repair. Dreams form and fade. The plateau's dark hollow is like that, outwardly still, inwardly active in small hidden ways. As we pass the far edge of the hollow, the ground rises again and grows stonier. A few larger granite blocks appear, their tops rounded and wet. One catches a faint line of sky along its upper edge. Another is almost invisible except where lichen makes a pale patch. We walk between them as if moving among sleeping forms. Boulders on the plateau can have many origins, from frost-shattered bedrock to glacially moved stones. Some are near their source. Others have been carried and left by ice. Their current stillness is the end of a long movement, or perhaps only a pause in movements too slow to notice. Frost, gravity and weather still touch them every year. The Cairngorms Granite Plateau is full of pauses that are not final. A boulder rests after being moved by ice. A snow patch rests before becoming water. A seed rests until conditions shift. A lichen rests through dryness. You rest as the words move on, and the idea of rest becomes part of the landscape rather than a departure from it. We come to a broad, nearly level place where the ground is gravelly and open. The darkness here feels lighter because there is less peat, more pale stone. The surface reflects what little sky remains. The wind crosses it cleanly. Your footsteps sound slightly clearer. A soft crunch and release that fades immediately behind us. The plateau's openness under night has a dreamlike quality. Without strong contrast, the land seems to float in its own quiet. The rounded heights are dark shapes beyond the nearer ground. The sky is a dim roof of cloud. Between them, we move along the ancient granite surface, not aiming for an ending, only continuing. If stars were visible, they would add another kind of depth above the plateau, but the cloud keeps the night close. That closeness is soothing. It prevents the mind from reaching too far. Instead, attention stays with damp stone, low plants, cold air, and the subdued movement of the ground beneath us. A low, soft rain begins at last, fine enough that it seems part of the mist. It touches the hood, the sleeves, the stones, the moss. At first, the sound is barely there. Then it becomes a delicate texture over the wind, a whispering contact across thousands of small surfaces. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau receives it without change in posture. Rain makes the granite smell stronger. It releases a clean mineral scent from stone and gravel, and deepens the earthy note from peat. Moss brightens in the dark. Water gathers in tiny channels and begins to move. The world becomes more connected, each drop finding another drop, each little surface joining the larger flow. We keep walking, but even more slowly now, because rain invites slowness. It smooths the soundscape, it darkens the ground, it makes the air feel intimate. The path shines faintly where water films over stone. In the low places, small runnels begin to speak, adding delicate new voices to the plateau's night. This rain is not a storm in our telling. It is a steady, soft arrival of water to a land that knows how to hold and release it. Some drops sink into moss, some move across granite, some join peat pools, some enter burns that will travel beyond this high country. Every drop becomes part of the plateau's patient circulation. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau has received countless rains like this. Rains in summer twilight, autumn darkness, spring thaw, and cold seasons when rain becomes sleet or snow. Each one leaves little traces, then joins the longer processes of weathering, soil formation, plant growth, and river flow. The present rain feels new to the skin, but ancient to the stone. You can listen to it now as a sleep sound. Fine rain on heather, fine rain on moss, fine rain on granite. The differences are subtle, blended, and soft enough to become one continuous hush. Under it, the wind moves more slowly. Under that, water gathers into hidden threads. Under everything, the granite remains. We pass a small hollow where rain is already stippling a dark pool. Each drop makes a tiny circle, and the circles overlap until the surface becomes a living pattern. There is no suddenness in it, only constant gentle contact. The pool receives each drop, folds it into itself, and returns to stillness between impacts too small to startle. The reflection of the sky in the pool is broken now, but not lost. It trembles in fragments, pale gray on dark water. Around the edge, moss leans inward, and a few granite pebbles rest partly submerged. This small pool seems to hold the whole night in miniature. Cloud, rain, stone, water, and quiet. We move past it, and the rain follows. It gathers on your shoulders and cools the air around your face. It softens the path behind us. It deepens every scent. The plateau feels less distant now, not because it has changed size, but because water has made contact everywhere. The high land is touching and being touched. Rain also speeds some forms of chemical weathering, though even that speed is slow by human measure. Water reacts with minerals, carries ions away, and helps feldspar alter over time. In cold granite country, these processes may be gradual, but they are part of the long release of rock into soil. Each soft rain participates in that old transformation. The idea is calming when held lightly. A drop falls, and a mountain changes by almost nothing. Another drop falls, and nothing visible happens. Yet over deep time, almost nothing becomes form, hollow, grain, burn, and valley. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau is a monument to quiet accumulation, and the rain is one of its gentlest tools. We climb a slight rise in the rain, and the wet gravel underfoot gives a darker sound. At the top there is no view now, only a broader darkness where the land continues. The cloud has settled low. The wind and rain move together. The plateau seems endless again, though the feeling is not lonely. It is spacious and calm. In this darkness, the guide beside you remains as a steady presence, not speaking too much, simply keeping the rhythm. We notice the firmer stones. We avoid the deeper moss. We pause when water crosses the path. We let the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau set the pace, because the land's pace is slower and wiser than ours tonight. Another burn appears, heard before seen, fuller now because of the rain. Its voice is still gentle, but rounder, carrying more water through a narrow channel. The rain stipples its surface where the current slows, and over small stones it makes a silver, restless pattern. We approach and stand near enough to hear its many quiet notes. The burn's flow depends on the catchment above it, on how much rain falls, how saturated the peat is, how quickly water moves over granite and through shallow soils. After dry weather, it may be a thread. After rain, it gathers strength. Yet here on the high plateau, it still feels young, close to its sources, close to the cloud that feeds it. You can feel the cold rising from it more strongly in the rain. The air near the water is damp and sharp. The stones along the bank are slick and dark. Mosses at the edge are saturated, their greens almost luminous even in low light. The burn carries the night forward, one small movement after another. We do not cross yet. We follow it for a while, letting its sound accompany the rain. The channel curves through the land, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden behind peat banks and heather. The path beside it is only a natural firmness, a slightly higher line where the ground stays less wet. Each step remains slow and careful. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau becomes deeply atmospheric here, not in any theatrical way, but through the meeting of elements. Rain descends, water runs, stone darkens, moss drinks, wind lowers, cloud rests on the land. The whole place seems to breathe water, and the breath is cool enough to calm every quick thought. There may be no moon visible through the cloud, yet the water shows itself by movement. Even in near darkness, moving water catches faint light differently from wet ground. It flickers softly where the current bends. It blackens where the channel deepens. It disappears under a bank and returns with a sound like cloth being drawn gently through a hand. Eventually the burn narrows at a stony place, and we cross over smooth, wet granite blocks that sit close together. The crossing is slow, deliberate and calm. The water passes beneath us with its quiet urgency, though urgency is only a human word. To the burn, this is simply the way downhill opens. On the far side, we climb out of the shallow channel and return to open ground. The rain continues, softer now, as if it has settled into the night and no longer needs to announce itself. The wind shifts behind us. The burn sound fades gradually until it becomes part of the general hush. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau in rain and darkness feels like an old sleeping body, breathing through watercourses and weather. Its granite bones lie beneath moss and peat. Its small streams move like quiet veins. Its low vegetation forms a thin, living cover. Its clouded sky rests close above, keeping the night enclosed and gentle. You can let that image remain wide and unfocused. There is no need to hold it sharply. The plateau is not a diagram. It is a presence, and in this hour its presence is enough. Old stone beneath you, rain around you, cool air in the lungs, a path that continues without needing an end. As we move farther, the rain begins to thin. It does not stop at once. It loosens into fewer drops, then returns briefly, then fades again. The sound on the ground becomes lighter. Water still runs from leaves and stones, so the plateau keeps making rain sounds even after the sky has nearly paused. This after-rain sound is especially restful. Droplets fall from heather into moss. Water slides down granite and taps into shallow pools. Tiny runnels keep moving where none were visible before. The landscape continues to echo the rain, as if remembering it out loud in very small voices. The air smells washed and cold. The granite scent is strongest now, clean and pale, with peat beneath it and the faint green of soaked moss. When you breathe in, the coolness seems to move slowly through the chest. When you breathe out, the breath joins the damp night and disappears almost immediately. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau has changed through the rain, though quietly. Surfaces have darkened, channels have filled, lichens have opened to moisture, mosses have swelled, gravel has settled, pools have widened by a fraction. The change is everywhere, yet nothing feels disturbed. Water has refreshed the land without breaking its calm. We cross a final patch of wet moss on this stretch, and the ground begins to rise toward a broad, shadowed height. The rain has left tiny beads along the heather, and when the wind moves them, some fall with a sound too small to hear. The path is dim, but the pale granite helps guide us. The rise is long and slow. As we ascend, the hollow behind us becomes invisible. The burn disappears. The scent of peat fades a little, replaced by stone and cold air. The wind is clearer near the top, but still gentle in the damp darkness. It moves across the plateau in long, even waves. On this higher ground, the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau feels stripped to its simplest language. Granite, moss, wind, water, cloud. The words themselves seem to slow when spoken in the mind. They do not form a list with sharp edges. They form a single low chord, steady enough to lean against. We pass over the crest without ceremony. The land beyond continues into darkness, broad and quiet, with another shallow descent waiting ahead. The night has not finished deepening. The plateau has not finished unfolding. We keep moving, not toward conclusion, but farther into the slow companionship of stone, rain-wet moss, and the soft ancient breath of the high granite land. The high granite land grows still around you, and the rain has become only a memory held in moss, peat, and shallow stone pools. The CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau rests beneath the low cloud, broad and dark, with its rounded backs fading into one another like quiet waves that have forgotten the sea. You feel the cold air soften against your face, and the sound of the wind lowers until it is almost only breath. We do not need to go farther now. The path has grown dim, the burns have settled into their hidden channels, and the wet granite holds the last pale trace of sky. Around your feet, the small plants press close to the ground. Heather, moss, bilberry, and lichen gathered into their patient forms, each one resting in the shelter of height, weather, and stone. There is no sharp edge to this ending. The plateau simply receives the night. Water continues under the rocks. Frost may come later, lightly touching the grass and the exposed grains of granite. Clouds move without hurry above the high ground, and somewhere beyond sight, a little stream keeps making its way down toward the glens. You can let your own thoughts move like that stream, quietly and without needing to be followed. The old stone beneath this place was once hidden deep in the earth, and now it lies open under wind, rain, snow, and stars, asking nothing, keeping its calm shape through the slow passing of seasons. Here, on the CAIRNGORMS Granite Plateau, the world is wide, cool, and almost dark. The moss has taken in the rain. The granite has given back its warmth. The burns speak softly below the stones, and the high land settles into its ancient silence, while you settle with it, resting in the quiet, where nothing more is needed.